Well, welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Ben Hunter, Booktopia's fiction category manager, and it's my pleasure to be in your ears again, recording over Zoom. And today I get to talk to Anna Downes, and I'm bloody thrilled about it. Anna Downes is a thriller writer based on New South Wales Central Coast, and her debut novel, The Safe Place, came out in 2020. It was published here and abroad to some acclaim, and she's followed that up really quickly with a new novel called The Shadow House, which is really scary. Anna Downes, welcome to the Booktopia podcast.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
You have made me not sleep with this new novel.
Sorry, not sorry.
Let's dive into it. It's interesting comparing it with The Safe Place, which is only, that's still fresh in everyone's minds. That's still a new novel, essentially. Your debut, that was set in the south of France in this beautiful estate.
Yeah.
And this new novel is also in an idyllic setting, and like the other one, not so idyllic things go down.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners about The Shadow House?
Yeah, sure. All right. So The Shadow House is about a single mother of two, Alex, who, in escaping from her own troubled past, or present, I should say, she's fleeing from something quite real. She moves with her baby and teenage son to an eco-village. It's very beautiful, it's very remote, and when she gets there it feels extremely idyllic. She makes friends, it feels very safe, but pretty soon some very strange things start to happen to her, and she finds out that in fact those very strange things, the same strange things, have happened to someone else, someone that used to live on the land that the eco-village was built over. And so essentially the book becomes about finding out what happened in the past in order to save her family in the present. If that makes some sense.
Said. It does. And just,
does.
You're making me relive it again now, which is I reckon most of our listeners will live in a classic Aussie brick and tile. So you better explain roughly what an eco-village is.
Oh, yeah, they're brilliant, actually. So I had a this first draft of this book, which is very different to how it's turned out. That first draft did not work, and I had to basically kind of scrap about 85% of it and rebuild again from square one, which was a terrifying experience. Part of the reason why that manuscript didn't work, there were a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons was that I hadn't quite nailed the setting. I hadn't quite found anywhere that was anchoring the story to any one place. And so, given that I had a deadline, I was like, where am I going to set this? What do I need? I need a community of people. I need, I had this set of criteria. And in that failed manuscript, one of the characters had a dream to build an eco-village. So I thought, right, okay, great. Let's run with that. Let's try and find some eco-villages that I could maybe look at online at the very least. Like, let's get an idea of what that might be. Just so happened, there is an eco-village, 15 minutes drive down the road from me. And so I hopped on their website, and it just so happened that they were doing an open day, I think this was a Thursday that I was looking, and they were having the open day on the Saturday. So booked a spot on the tour, went down there, drove in through the gates, and just went, oh yes, this is exactly what I need. And what I mean by that is, so eco-villages are sort of like gated communities. They sort of operate separately to the general community, but in the sense that they're finding new ways to live, self-sustainable ways. They often have their own smart grid, for example, so they manage their own power. they often make decisions together as a community, as opposed to having, you know, a centralized leader or anything like that. The one that I spent time with actually uses a system called sociocracy. So they have these different ways of managing themselves. They live in sustainable homes. They grow their own produce. You know, most
So it's
of
a bit
them,
like a commune, but without the cultiness.
yeah. I mean, you know, I think there's still a little bit of mystery surrounding eco-villages at the moment. They're not massively mainstream still, so there is a little bit of, who are these strange people and how are they living? You know, the people that I've met weren't strange at all. They were absolutely delightful, and actually most of them, you know, some of them were still commuting to Sydney, and the eco-village itself that I've spent time in was it's quite close to a sort of central business district, so you know, they're not completely isolated. They go out and you know, and work like everybody else, or I mean, not anymore, I guess everybody's at home, but still, you know, in theory they go out and work and then come home to the village, but they're just all living with a small eco footprint and trying to live as best they can in a way that works with the land. And yeah.
So your hero, Alex, with two children in tow, one a 14-year-old recalcitrant, very online teenager, and a very young baby, arrives in this place, and she's running from her own demons, right? She's very isolated herself.
Yeah, she is, and that was a very deliberate choice. I wanted to remove as many supports as possible from her, remove as many support networks as I could, so that she had to be entirely self-sufficient for this story. So there was no other option but to you know, solve her problems herself. But yeah, she's really isolated to begin with. So in moving to this eco village, what she's hoping for is you know, some safety among numbers, but also in a place where she does feel removed from the things that she's running from, and a little bit of obscurity and anonymity as well within that community.
It makes me think, you know, the safe place you wrote about, this estate in the south of France, is just over the top luxurious place, and that was inspired by your own experience. You were like an au pair, right? When you were younger.
We were so it was a job that I did with my now husband, and we were traveling at the time, and we were employed as caretakers / housekeepers. So we lived on site, and our main responsibilities was looking after the grounds and the house, but we did also do some you know, babysitting and tutoring for the family's children. My husband's a teacher, a primary school teacher, so it was kind of a natural thing for us to do for them.
It makes me think, you know, you wrote that story about a young one, you know, coming from England to work in this isolated place in the south of France, and now you've written this novel about an English mother again. She's a mother, and she is on the sunny coast, and so it sounds like you're mining your own life in some sense to pull elements for a story. Is that something that is like crucial to you, or is it just all part of the creative hodgepodge?
Yeah, I think both. For me, mining my own personal experience and my own personal circumstances and history is important as a jumping off point. It's a good kind of springboard into something else. So as with The Safe Place, I used something that I knew very much about, both in a circumstantial way, but also an emotional way. So that feeling of isolation and not knowing where you belong and feeling very lost, and coming to terms with aspects of yourself that you don't really understand. There's all of that going on that I knew about emotionally. But then once you start to craft that story, it becomes its own thing, you know. So then you can't stick super closely to your own story because it no longer fits the narrative, if you see what I mean. So with the Shadow House, again, you know, starting from a point that I, you know, of things that I know about into things that I don't. And again, the story of the Shadow House took on its own life after a point. So I think, yeah, your own experiences are brilliant and useful up to a point, and certainly they're useful to imbue color, emotional color into a scene as well when you need it. But ultimately, the characters are their own, and the narrative is its own.
You were a television actor in the UK. When did writing become a thing, and how did writing become a thing for you?
So when I stopped being an actor, it was largely because, for me anyway, it wasn't a particularly nice way to live. It's so unpredictable, and you know, I'm not somebody that handles that kind of unpredictability very well, and so leaving that career was about taking back a bit of control for myself. And then, you know, long story short, met my now husband, moved out here to Australia, and set about building a whole new life, but without a creative career. You know, one that I didn't just fall into acting. I worked for a very, very long time, and it was everything. You know, I was the kind of kid, I never did anything else but sort of acting classes, and I was just ridiculously passionate about it. And it was just such a huge part of my life. So to then find myself, you know, very happy living on the other side of the world, you know, with no family. I didn't really know anybody except my husband and his friends and his family. I'd kind of restyled myself as a massage therapist. I'd done a massage qualification. I was working for a chiropractor. Yes, yeah, as you do. A great passport job, you know, can pick it up anywhere. But yeah, you know, had got married, had my kids, and just realized that without any kind of creative outlet, I just had no idea who I was or how to achieve anything as well. Like, motherhood is obviously full of achievement, but nothing really tangible. No one's giving you that gold star. Nobody's telling you every day that you've done really well. And thus far, the thing that I'd always achieved best at was creativity. And so I kind of fell into, I got myself in a real state, and the way out of that was to kind of do some kind of creativity. And I picked writing because I could go and do that off my own back. You know, I could lock myself away in the spare room and write. And it was just a thing that I did for myself to kind of make myself feel better. But there did come a point where I started to wonder if I might be any good at it, and if there might be any kind of future in it. At which point, you know, you start reading your how-to books, you do your online courses, wrote some short fiction, sent it off. Got some short listings, and then I was kind of, you know, I got the hunger.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
it's odd, like the life of a actor sounds, you know, polar opposite to novel writing, which is a very isolated activity, right?
yeah,
You spend the vast majority of your time well outside of the limelight, as it were.
yeah,
And that's not to say that acting is all glitz and glamour. That's mainly just really hard work,
yeah,
and
it is.
waiting for phone calls.
Yeah.
Uh, but like the more, like it seems really far removed, but thinking about it, you would have spent a long time immersed in storytelling of one shape or another, and that must have been informative in some way, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I didn't just train as an actor. I also did an academic degree in drama. So I spent 3 years studying the history of theatre and film theory and dramaturgy. And, you know, all different sorts of academic aspects of the subject. So, I mean, I learned storytelling as a discipline and a practice even before I trained in the practical elements of acting. And that was all incredibly formative. I mean, storytelling has been my life for so long, that it did feel quite natural. But of course, the major difference is that with acting, you're using your voice and your body, you know, and with writing, you've got the page and words, and so it is massively different. And it's a craft that I, you know, how to express. Starting, I had that awful moment of fear where I'm like, who do I think I am? I can't write. It's a ridiculous notion. But then I realized that actually, you know, I had laid a lot of the groundwork already. So it was both a huge leap and a not so huge leap. Yeah.
And this might be a dumb question, but when you're sitting at the desk composing a novel like this, do you find yourself inhabiting these characters of yours? You know, take someone like Kit or Alex from this new novel, and you think to yourself, oh, how would what would Kit's posture be like, and how would he compose himself? Like, and do you kind of embody them at the table?
I mean, like, I'm not getting up and performing my scenes, like
walking around the house talking to yourself.
Well, no, not in a way that you might imagine. But I think for me, the key to good dialogue is being able to hear it and speak it. And if it doesn't, if it's not something that you feel you might say as that character, it shouldn't be there. And the only way you're going to know if that character would say it is if you are correctly and effectively inhabiting them. So there is a bit of a performance element to it, and I definitely find myself workshopping certain maybe emotional reactions, you know, kind of again, not sitting there performing them, but definitely, like, you know, if I have to describe let's take The Safe Place. If I have to describe a panic attack, I'll kind of you know, what happens to your body when you breathe fast? Let's see how that feels. You know, how might I describe that? What's going on up in the throat? Is it coming from the throat, or is it coming from the lungs? Where does that feeling originate? Where does it finish? What's your skin feeling like? You know, it's not like I'm not putting myself into a panic attack, but that there are certain physical elements of it that are really worth exploring if you're going to kind of precisely and accurately express what that feels like, as opposed to just lay down a whole load of tropes and cliches.
Oh, I love that. Something wildly different I'm going to ask about, because I'm bad at segues, is
lovely.
You put The Safe Place out in the time of Corona. You've got a second novel coming out during the Corona after party. You know, like, establishing yourself as an author at this time is really hard. But I've been following you, and you've really pushed it by being a kind of aggressive joiner-innerer. In comparison to like, maybe it's your extroversion, but like, so a lot of authors, you know, I just would be at a loss to try and establish themselves at this time. But I see you up there, and you're endorsing other writers, and they're endorsing you. I'm looking at the early copy of The Shadow House now, and you've got Candace Bloody Fox on the front of the book saying vivid, tense, troubling, which she's absolutely correct about. What I wanted to ask is, like, what's interesting to you about the scene, particularly for thriller writers or crime writers in Australia?
That's such a good question. Yeah, I mean, all right, so it has been a really weird time to establish oneself. And I think you're absolutely bang on. Like, yes, aggressive joiner-innerer, that is me. But I think that comes from two different places. It obviously comes from the fact that, I mean, I am an extrovert. I am just a kind of general aggressive joiner-innerer in life. But I have had a creative career before that was, in part dependent on good networking. So I have a bit of a knowledge as to what that entails, but I also don't think that you can network well without having a genuine passion and an interest in other people's work and in other people's lives. And so the fact that I'm a voracious reader and a embarrassing fangirl, and I am genuinely curious as to how other people's creative process works. And, I want to support other people's books. And that kind of helps. There's a, it's not a forced, artificial. So what are you writing about? Might you be able to, you scratch my back if I scratch yours, kind of thing. It's not that. It's what are you doing and why? And that's so interesting and amazing. And oh, look at that, we have all these connections and things in common. Oh my goodness, we're friends, yay, and then you read their books and they're wonderful and you want to talk about them and you want to put them out there. So yes, it has been a weird time, but it's also been an amazing time. And I do think that the scene, that the community is really strong. It's full of wonderful people who are ridiculously supportive. I would say writers on the whole, I haven't met an asshole yet, which is nice. And the crime community particularly, I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily call what I write straight up crime, but they've been really welcoming and beautiful, and they're just such a tight-knit community anyway. But chuck in a pandemic and everybody has really kind of come together, especially to champion new writers and hold those people up who are struggling. I've really found that, and I would love to be somebody that pays that forward, to be honest. Like I was so overwhelmed at how kind everybody was to me last year. So yeah, I've been really trying to pay that forward and do it for the people.
I love that. Speaking of like fangirling, whose novels have you been enjoying? What's really good at the moment, other than Anna Downs?
Oh, so many people, so many books at the moment. I might have to get my I post everything I read. I post about on Instagram, or most of the things that I read. So what have I read lately? Literally just finished Catherine Heine's book, Early Morning Riser, and I love her. She's incredible. I've just read A Slow Fire Burning. Did you read that? The new Paula Hawkins?
No, is that good?
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I was quite surprised to find that the reviews have been mixed here and there. There's been a kind of an interesting reaction to certain parts of the book. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. I thought it the kind of the pacing of it was really beautifully done. I think she's an exceptional writer. I'm about to dig into the new Leanne. Very excited about Apples Never Fall.
Very good.
Let's see what's coming up. So you're going to want to look out for Sarah Foster's The Hush. That's going to be really interesting. That's going to spark a lot of interesting conversations. Sarah's an incredible writer, and this one's a real departure for her. So that's going to be great for her. Margaret Hickey's Cutter's End I read just recently as well, and that's another really interesting crime novel. Yeah, so kind of following the red dirt outback noir tradition, but it has a kind of an edge that some of the others don't have. So that's really intriguing. And I just read an amazing book called 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, which was a Reese's book club pick. But I just haven't read a book that delightful for a really long time. I read a lot of dark stuff. I love dark stuff. And have you read The Last House on Needless Street, Catriona Ward? Oh my God.
No.
So that blew me away. Actually, that's probably my number one recommendation of the year. I loved that book so much. But it is very, very dark, and I read a lot of dark stuff. But 7 Days in June was probably it was just sheer delight, and it's about two authors, two Black authors in New York City, who were involved, many, many, many years ago, and have since kind of been writing to one another through their books, not actually writing to one another, but they've kind of written about each other for many years. And so the book is about when their kind of accidental reunion, and it's just amazing.
Oh, that's
brilliant,
gorgeous.
Brilliant book. Yeah, very funny.
Good stack.
Yes, so many good books to read. It makes
me think. You said earlier that you wouldn't describe yourself purely as a crime writer, right? And I was describing The Shadow House, which I was just finishing, to colleagues last night, a little Zoom catch up, and I sort of said, it's about this mother who's escaping domestic violence, and she comes to this closed off eco commune, and it seems really gorgeous, but she doesn't know anything about the people around her, and immediately she starts getting really creepy messages, and parcels arrive on the doorstep, and they have dead animals in them, of all things. Very creepy. And there's all these whispers in town of something really dark that comes for people's children. And people said, oh, so it's a horror novel. You're reading a horror novel, Ben? And I said, I kind of am, but what I'm really reading is a psychological thriller, right? How do you? I just wanted to ask about the whole genre thing. Do you obviously are a bit loose on genre? You're not married to it, and there's a bit of freedom there, right?
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I mean, genre is a really, really fascinating subject, and I could talk for a long time about it, because it's really helpful as a reader and a writer to know the framework within which you're writing or reading, right? And each genre sort of has its own, let's say, rules, which again are incredibly helpful. And story works a certain way for a certain reason, right? There's a reason why we have a protagonist and antagonist, conflict resolution. Those things are they're set in stone, and they are there to help you. Having said that, with genre at the moment, and in this kind of market, I often do think there's a lot to play with, and it's okay if what you want to write doesn't fit a mold particularly. I think it's okay to surprise readers. You are going to get a bit of backlash from the purists who say, well, why wasn't there a car chase in this action novel? And you're like, well, that's because it's not strictly an action novel. That's an example. I'm not writing action novels, but I think I write what I would want to read, and what I want to read is a little bit of everything. I think that I'm largely concerned with themes around parenting and family, and the ways in which people love, and the ways in which people's hearts are broken, the way people heal and mend after trauma. But I am obsessed with horror. I love dark stuff. I love to be kind of misled and misguided. I love misdirection. But I also want what I want from a good book is I don't care what genre it is. I don't care what framework you're using. But if you can simultaneously show me a bit of my own heart, but also show me a perspective I've never seen before, or show me something completely different that I've never considered before, that does it for me. If you can also make me laugh here and there, lovely. And if you can scare me as well.
You made me laugh in amongst the
good.
terror.
Good.
She's like this character, Alex. She's actually very funny.
Good.
in spite of all her troubles.
Well, that's good to hear.
I really enjoyed that. And the attention she has with the 14-year-old son, they're a team, right? They've been through everything together. She is a single mom, and she has this 14-year-old son, Ollie, and he is very online, and he is doing stuff online, and that is problematic, right? And I just found that, I think a lot of people are going to find that really interesting to read about. Were you researching creepy 14-year-old boys going on the dark web, or like?
So a lot of that aspect and many other aspects in the story come from a desire to explore the fact that it's a very scary time to be a parent right now, for lots and lots of different reasons. Climate change, pandemic, but if you are a millennial parent, I think someone described me recently as a geriatric millennial, which is not that attractive a term, I know, but if you are a parent who has grown up without the internet, and yet you are trying to raise children in an era that is defined by it, you're dealing with an awful lot of unfamiliarity and real fear of the unknown as well. So trying to guide a beloved child through a world that you don't fully understand is something that I'm kind of trying to work out in this book, and fear, and how people act on that fear, sometimes with the best interest, sometimes not. There's a lot of very frightened parents in the book. Well said.
Both of your novels, they really beautifully work with the internalized neuroses of women, based on all of the expectations the world puts on them, and that motherhood is central to that. How old are your kids now?
5 and 7. Yeah. So been writing since Daisy was about 8 months old. So yeah, I've been processing all of that stuff.
She's a literary baby then.
She's a literary baby, yeah. Yeah.
Do you imagine the day soon when they'll be old enough to watch mum on telly programs from back in the day and read mum's books? Won't that be weird?
Maybe. So Jack, when you guys sent me my my books to sign, Jack was with me.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh no, thank you. That was lovely. It was amazing. But yeah, so he helped me kind of unpack them and put them in the piles, and he was kind of fascinated. Kept leafing through them and looking at my picture and going, "Mummy, did you write all these books?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, yeah, they're the same book. Like, I didn't write all of them individually." But then, interestingly, I mean, homeschooling has been a bit of a battle, and particularly with writing, he's found that really hard. But the next day, he said, "Mummy, I want to write a book." And so, we're putting this little book together. It's like a comic book, and it's called The Mysterious Lands, written and read by, and he's put his little name at the bottom. And honestly, I've just, that week I was like, right, well, clearly my work is done. I can kind of give myself a little pat on the back there. Like, it's gorgeous. And he has such a massive love of reading. I mean, Daisy's still really young, but, she's got a love of story as well. So I hope that's how that rubs off on them.
So the Shadow House will be in stores now. And obviously online at Booktopia. When I assume this is your vocation now, you've been bitten by the writing bug. Will you have another novel next year or beyond?
Yeah, I'm working on book 3. I am in it for the long haul. I definitely want to amass a body of work. How frequently I get those out, I don't know. I mean, this book, The Shadow House, was quite stressful to write, I've got to be honest, because of the
stressful to read.
Well, no, but not just because of its subject matter, but because of the I think, you know, second novel syndrome is a bit of a catchphrase. It's a bit of a thing, and I think one of the reasons it's a thing is that for debut writers, you know, your debut novel feels like a bit of a lottery win, and then your second novel is quite a culture shock, because now, you know, your writing is not just on your terms, and there are expectations and there are consequences attached to kind of what you do, and the deadlines. If you've never worked with a deadline before, that's quite frightening. And so I think I'm still yet to work out the most efficient way of writing, and the least kind of complicated way of putting my stories together. So I would probably, for the next one, quite like a little bit more breathing space in terms of time, but we'll see. I mean, I've already got a good idea. I'm kind of forging ahead with that, and I think, yeah, once you get on a roll, you just you go with it, and it's kind of unpredictable how fast I'll be able to write those. But
whatever you're doing,
I'm here
keep
for it.
Doing it.
Thank you.
Because The Shadow House has raised the stakes. Has really stepped up your writing to a new level. I think people are going to love it. Thank you, Anna Downs, for spending some time chatting on the Booktopia podcast.
Ben, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a lovely chat. Thank you.
Shadow House is published by Affirm Press. You can buy it right now from booktopia.com.au.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free, and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces, and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast, and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.